The forest at night was never quiet. Even without gunfire, without footsteps, without human voices, it pulsed with sound. The buzz of insects, the occasional cry of a bird, the whisper of wind sliding through the branches overhead. To Sergeant Eliza Grant, those sounds had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. They were the soundtrack of survival. But that night, the forest betrayed her. She and her 4-woman squad had been tasked with reconnaissance, nothing more. A simple in-and-out mission, command had called it. Slip behind enemy lines, observe the patrols, confirm whether the rumors of an incoming supply convoy were true, and then return before dawn. No shots fired, no risks taken. That had been the plan. The plan didn't survive first contact. Eliza crouched low in the ferns, her M4 carbine tight against her shoulder, scanning the darkness through her night vision goggles. Beside her, Private Keisha Hall's breath came quick and shallow, the nervous rhythm of someone still new to the deep field. Ahead, the squad leader, Corporal Rivera, raised a clenched fist. Halt. That was when the forest erupted. The first explosion lit the night in green fire, the shockwave flattening branches and hurling dirt skyward. Claymores, dozens of them, set in a brutal kill zone. The squad dove for cover, but the jungle offered no mercy. Bullets lanced through the foliage, sparking against rocks, tearing bark from trees. Eliza hit the ground hard, pain lancing up her side. She rolled, weapon up, eyes searching for the source of the fire. Through her goggles, she caught glimpses of muzzle flashes, 6 at least. Enemy patrols, waiting for them. Contact left. Contact left. Rivera's voice cut through the chaos. Eliza squeezed off control bursts, sending tracers streaking into the tree-line. She caught the shape of a man ducking low, then another charging forward. She aimed, fired, and watched him crumple. But the squad was pinned. Hall screamed as a bullet grazed her arm, spinning her into the mud. Eliza grabbed her by the vest and hauled her behind a fallen log, heart pounding. Leaves shredded above them as rounds chewed through. Stay down. Eliza barked. She peeked over the log, firing another burst. But for every enemy she dropped, 2 more pressed forward. It was then she realized this wasn't a chance encounter. They'd been waiting for them. Someone had tipped them off. The squad tried to fall back, retreating deeper into the trees, but in the chaos, Eliza lost sight of Rivera and another teammate. She shouted into her radio, but static filled her earpiece. Jammed. Then it happened. A sharp impact slammed into Eliza's side, hot pain tearing through her body. She staggered, the world spinning, her weapon slipping from her grasp. She hit the dirt hard, the air gone from her lungs. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Through the haze of pain, she felt hands on her shoulders, Hall dragging her back, straining with every step. Eliza, stay with me, Hall shouted. But Eliza knew. They couldn't carry her and keep fighting. Not in this kill zone. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Rivera's silhouette in the distance, her rifle spitting fire as she shouted an order Eliza couldn't hear. And then the jungle swallowed her whole. When Eliza woke, the world was silent again. No gunfire, no shouting, no explosions. Only the endless drone of the jungle. Her body throbbed with pain, every breath sharp and shallow. She reached down, fingers brushing the ragged wound in her side, sticky with blood. She was alive, but barely. Her rifle was gone, torn from her grip in the chaos. Her radio was cracked, wires exposed, useless. The rest of her squad, gone. For a long moment, she lay still, staring at the canopy above, listening to the buzz of insects and the distant rush of a river. She felt small, fragile, a single wounded body in an ocean of wilderness. Enemy lines stretched for miles in every direction. They had left her. The thought pierced deeper than the bullet wound. She tried to shove it away, tried to believe they had no choice, that retreat had been the only option. But the image of them fading into the trees while she bled in the mud burned into her mind. Gritting her teeth, She rolled onto her knees. Pain roared through her side, nearly blacking her out. She forced herself up, one hand pressed to the wound, the other dragging her battered body toward a patch of cover. Every step was agony. She stumbled through the underbrush, branches tearing at her uniform, mud sucking at her boots. Her breaths came ragged, sweat stinging her eyes. She found a hollow beneath a fallen tree and collapsed inside, curling into the shadows. Minutes or hours passed. She didn't know. At some point, she heard voices. Harsh, guttural. Enemy soldiers sweeping the forest. Their flashlights flickered through the trees, beams slicing dangerously close. Eliza clamped a hand over her mouth, fighting the tremors that racked her body. They passed, but not far. She could hear their boots crunching in the underbrush, their radios crackling. They were hunting her. Her heart pounded. She knew she couldn't stay in one place. With sheer will, she crawled out from her hollow and began moving again, inch by inch, dragging herself through the undergrowth. She followed the distant sound of water, reasoning that rivers led to roads, and roads led, eventually, to allies. The night stretched on, endless and merciless. Her wound burned hotter with every movement, blood soaking through her uniform. Still, she kept going. Every branch she pushed aside, every root she crawled over, every step she forced her body to take. She did it with one thought seared into her mind. Her squad had left her, but she wasn't going to die here. Not alone. And, if she ever saw them again, she would make sure they remembered this night. Corporal Rivera sat hunched over the map, her face lit only by the dim glow of a red-lensed flashlight. The others were silent around her. Private Keisha Hall and Specialist Torres, mud-smeared, blood-stained, eyes wide and hollow. They had escaped the kill zone by sheer luck, cutting through the thickets and slipping past patrols until the jungle had swallowed them. But escape hadn't brought relief. It had only left a crushing weight on their shoulders. Rivera traced a line on the map with her finger, whispering as though the trees themselves might be listening. If we move east, we'll hit the extraction point by dawn. Command is expecting us there. Torres shifted uneasily, hugging her rifle tight. And Eliza? The name hung in the air like a wound that refused to close. Hall spoke up before Rivera could answer. Her voice shook, but there was steel beneath it. She was still breathing when I left her. I dragged her as far as I could. Rivera cut her off. You did the right thing. If you'd stayed, you'd both be dead. Hall's jaw tightened. She's still out there. The jungle around them moaned with unseen creatures. The memory of that ambush, the gunfire, the explosions, the chaos, still rang in their ears. Going back meant death. Everyone knew it. Rivera closed her eyes. She was the leader. She was supposed to be decisive, unshakable. But the truth pressed on her chest. She had ordered the retreat. She had left one of her own behind. Protocol says we move forward, she said finally, forcing the words past her lips. Hall snapped her head up. Protocol? She's not a line in a manual, Corporal. She's our sister. Silence fell again. The jungle hissed with rain starting to fall, a thin drizzle seeping through the leaves. Each drop pattered on their helmets, cold as accusation. Rivera thought of Eliza's face, gritty, determined, the kind of soldier who always stepped forward first, who carried weight others couldn't. The memory of her falling, blood dark against her uniform, burned in Rivera's mind. She looked at her squad. 2 pairs of eyes, tired but resolute, staring back at her. Command expected them to leave. Logic demanded they move on. But loyalty, the kind that ran deeper than orders, demanded something else. Rivera exhaled slowly, then snapped the map shut. We go back, she said. Hall's relief was instant, though it showed in nothing more than the tight clench of her fists. Torres nodded once, solemn, like a priest sealing a vow. Rivera's voice hardened. We go back smart, silent, fast. No heroics. We find her, and we all get out, or none of us do. The jungle had a way of swallowing time. For Eliza, Minutes bled into hours until they became meaningless. Only pain, fear, and determination marked the passage of her night. Her body was a patchwork of agony. Her left leg burned where shrapnel had sliced deep, every movement a fresh reminder of the ambush. The gauze she had wrapped earlier was soaked through, stiff with dried blood and rain. Her head throbbed with dehydration. Hunger clawed at her stomach. She wasn't surviving because she had strength left. She was surviving because she refused to stop. But the jungle wasn't empty. Every step forward, she felt the enemy pressing closer, like shadows always just beyond her line of sight. A mile behind her, for men picked their way carefully through the undergrowth. Their uniforms were soaked, their boots caked in mud, but their eyes were sharp. These weren't rookies. They were trackers, experienced soldiers who knew how to find the weak, the wounded, the alone. Their leader, a stocky man with a scar running across his chin, crouched and pointed to the ground. Blood. Fresh. He grinned, his teeth flashing white in the green gloom. "She won't last long," he muttered to the others. "We'll take her alive if we can." The men nodded, adjusting their grips on their rifles. Their hunt was patient, methodical, certain. Eliza stumbled forward, leaning against a tree for support. Rain pattered down from the canopy, dripping from her helmet into her eyes. She blinked, swiping at the water with trembling hands. She wanted to collapse. Her body begged her to. But she knew what would happen if she did. "They'll find me. They'll finish it." So she pressed on, following the faint sound of water until she reached a stream. Kneeling, she cupped her hands and scooped the water greedily. It was icy, metallic, but it slid down her throat like life itself. She dunked her face in, gasping, the cold shocking her awake. When she pulled back, her reflection stared up at her from the rippling surface, mud-smeared, eyes hollow, lips cracked. She looked like a ghost. But ghosts didn't bleed. She tore a strip from her uniform and re-wrapped her leg, hissing as she pulled it tight. The pain nearly made her black out, but the bleeding slowed. She forced herself up again, teeth clenched, breath ragged. "Move, Eliza. Just move." Elsewhere in the jungle, Corporal Rivera led her two soldiers silently through the trees. Their bodies were as battered as their missing comrades, but their purpose carried them forward. Hall, her rifle at the ready, glanced down at the ground where faint smears of blood marked the leaves. Her heart skipped. "Corporal," she whispered, pointing. Rivera crouched, touching the stain. It was sticky, dark, still wet. Her eyes lifted, meeting Hall's. "She's close." Behind them, Torres scanned the tree line, his voice low and tense. "We're not the only ones who know it." Rivera gave a sharp nod. She didn't need to say more. They were already moving faster, every sense stretched thin, rifles tight in their grips. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were hunters too. Eliza pressed forward, step by step, dragging herself along the stream's edge. And then she heard voices. At first she thought she was hallucinating. But the voices were real, close, sharp with command. She dropped instantly, crawling into the brush, pulling leaves and mud over herself. Her chest rose and fell in rapid bursts. The patrol was back. 4 men. She could see them through the foliage. One carried a flashlight, sweeping it across the jungle floor. Another muttered something in a low growl, pointing toward the stream. Her knife was in her hand before she even thought about it. If they found her, she would fight. She had nothing else left. The beam of the flashlight swept closer. It passed across her mud-smeared face, lingered for half a second, and then moved on. Her breath caught. The men continued forward, footsteps crunching. One bent to touch the ground where her blood had dripped. He muttered something, pointing east. Then, slowly, they disappeared into the trees. Eliza stayed frozen, her muscles screaming, until silence returned. Only then did she let out a sob she had been holding in her chest, muffled against the earth. Rivera, Hall, and Torres cut through the storm, rain pelting their helmets, rifles slick in their hands. The jungle had turned into a maze of mist and shadow, every direction the same. Then something. A faint sound. Rivera froze, raising her fist. The others crouched instantly. They strained their ears. A cough. Weak, broken. Hall's eyes went wide. She didn't wait. She sprinted forward, her boots splashing in mud, ignoring Rivera's whispered warning. There, by the stream, half collapsed in the mud, Eliza. Hall dropped to her knees beside her, cradling her head in her arms. Oh, God! Eliza. Eliza blinked, confusion mixing with disbelief. Her lips trembled. You came back. Rivera crouched beside them, her face hard but her voice soft. Of course we did. Torres took position immediately, scanning the trilene, every sense on edge. The reunion lasted seconds, because the danger was far from over. Rivera's voice sharpened. We've got her. Now, we move. But moving wasn't going to be easy. Eliza could barely stand. Her weight sagged against Hall, her steps stumbling, her breath shallow. Carrying her would slow them. And the hunters were still out there, somewhere in the jungle. Those 4 men turned at the sound of a faint cry, their eyes narrowing. The trail wasn't cold anymore, and this time they weren't far. The rain did not let up. It came down in sheets, turning the jungle floor into sucking mud that clung to boots and dragged at every step. For Rivera, Hall, and Torres, the storm was a curse, but also a blessing. It muffled their movements. It washed away scents and tracks. Yet it also threatened to slow them down, and time was something they had none of. Hall hooked her arms under Eliza's shoulders, gritting her teeth as she tried to lift her. Eliza groaned, her body limp, legs refusing to hold weight. The blood loss had drained her almost dry. Corporal, she can't walk, Hall said, her voice edged with panic. Rivera's jaw was tight. She knew at the moment she laid eyes on her wounded comrade. But hearing it out loud made the choice in front of her heavier. We'll carry her, Rivera said flatly. Torres slung his rifle across his back and crouched, lifting Eliza onto his shoulders in a fireman's carry. She was lighter than she should have been, her muscles wasted from hours of exertion and starvation. But even so, his knees wobbled under the added weight. Rivera gave him a sharp look. Switch when you can. Keep moving. The squad pressed on, every step a gamble. The hunters were closer now. The scarred man leading them crouched near the stream, his fingers brushing the churned mud. He grinned again. 2 sets of prints, he murmured. No, 3. His voice was amused, almost delighted. The little squad came back for her. One of his men spat. Fools. Now we take them all. The scarred man straightened, his rifle gleaming wet in the rain. His smile was cold. Exactly. They moved faster. Torres staggered through the undergrowth, branches slapping his face, mud sucking at his boots. Eliza's body was dead weight on his shoulders, her shallow breaths the only sign she was still clinging to life. Rivera ranged ahead, machete in hand, hacking a narrow path. Hall stayed back, eyes sharp, rifle raised, guarding their rear. Every few minutes, Torres' muscles shook violently, his breath coming in ragged gasps. At last he dropped to one knee, lowering Eliza carefully into the mud. I can't, he panted. She's too much. I'll take her, Hall said quickly, slinging her rifle and crouching down. Rivera helped ease Eliza onto Hall's back. Hall grunted under the strain, adjusting her grip. She wasn't as strong as Torres, but she had the fire to push through. Eliza stirred faintly, her voice barely audible. Leave me. I'm slowing you. Rivera crouched, gripping her face with mud-streaked hands. Her voice was iron. Shut up, Sergeant. You're coming with us. For a moment, Eliza's eyes watered. Not from pain, but from something else. Something she hadn't dared hope for in the hours she thought she was already dead. Family. The gunfire came suddenly. A sharp crack cut through the rain, echoing through the jungle. A round smacked into a tree inches from Torres' head, splintering bark. Down. Rivera barked. They dove into the mud, Eliza half-dragged, half-pulled behind cover. Hall shielded her body with her own as bullets chewed through the foliage. The hunters had found them. Rivera snapped her rifle to her shoulder and fired in quick bursts. Torres followed suit, his weapon barking thunder into the night. The rain made visibility near zero, muzzle flashes lighting the trees like lightning. Somewhere out there, the hunters returned fire, measured, precise, never panicked. Rivera knew instantly. These weren't just trackers. They were professionals. And they were outnumbered. "We can't win this fight," Rivera shouted over the storm. "We move." Torres grabbed Eliza again, throwing her across his shoulders, and the squad broke into a sprint. Gunfire chased them, bullets snapping overhead, cutting through leaves. The jungle turned into chaos, sliding mud, tangled roots, crashing branches. Twice Torres nearly fell, but each time he forced his legs to keep going. Hall fired blind into the trees. Her muzzle flashed the only thing keeping the hunters cautious. Rivera led them toward a ridge. It wasn't shelter, but it was higher ground. And in the jungle, high ground meant life. They scrambled up, mud slick under their boots, lungs burning. At the top, they collapsed behind a line of mossy rocks, gasping. For a moment, silence. Only the rain. But Rivera knew better. The hunters weren't gone. They were circling. The ridge gave them little advantage. The jungle pressed tight, visibility no more than 20 feet. Shadows moved with the trees, and every sound was suspect. Rivera crouched low, checking her rifle. Only 2 magazines left. Torres had 1. Hall had maybe 3. Against 4 relentless enemies who knew the jungle as well as they did, the math was cruel. Eliza lay between them, her skin pale, lips cracked. She was fading. Rivera forced her voice steady. "We hold them off long enough for extraction. That's it. Just hold." Hall's face was pale in the dim light, but her jaw was set. "What if they don't come?" Rivera didn't answer. She couldn't. The hunters close in. Scarchin crouched in the brush below the ridge, signaling his men silently. They spread out like wolves, patient, disciplined. 1 crept left, 1 right, the last keeping pressure from below. Scar's eyes gleamed. He could almost taste victory. A flicker of hope. Rivera adjusted her radio, static crackling in her ear. She had been calling for extraction all night, but the storm had drowned her signal. This time, something different. A faint voice. "Copy, repeat your position." Her heart kicked hard. She pressed the mic tight. "This is Corporal Rivera, squad pinned and carrying wounded. Grid coordinates." Static. The signal cut. But it was enough. Someone had heard them. She looked at her squad, her voice sharp with renewed fire. "They know we're here. We just have to hold." The first assault. The jungle erupted. Gunfire tore from the left flank as one of the hunters opened up, spraying their rocky cover. Hall fired back, her rifle jerking in her hands, eyes blazing. She hit nothing but foliage, but the noise kept the enemies head down. On the right, another burst. Bullets smacked into stone inches from Rivera's face, one slicing a groove into her helmet. She ducked, firing 2 controlled bursts in reply. Torres shouted, "They're pushing us from both sides." Rivera's mind raced. They couldn't hold a siege. The hunters would bleed them dry. They had to turn the fight. Eliza's voice. Amid the chaos, a weak hand tugged at Rivera's sleeve. Eliza, barely conscious, her eyes unfocused. "Rivera, my pack." Rivera blinked. "What?" Eliza coughed, her voice rasping. "Smoke grenades, back pocket use them." Rivera's hand shot to Eliza's pack. Sure enough, 2 smoke grenades, almost forgotten. She yanked them free, pulled the pins, and hurled them down the ridge. Thick plumes of white and red smoke billowed instantly, rolling through the jungle like ghostly walls. The hunters' gunfire faltered. Their vision was gone. Rivera seized the moment. Now. Hit them. The counterattack. Torres and Hall leaned out, firing into the smoke. Their shots weren't precise, but they didn't need to be. The confusion was enough. One of the hunters screamed, a sharp cry cut short. Scar's voice bellowed in reply, furious, rallying his men. Bullets ripped blindly through the haze, cutting down branches and vines. Rivera's heart pounded. They had bought a few precious seconds, but only seconds. She looked down at Eliza. Her comrade's eyes were fluttering shut, her body trembling. "Stay with me," Rivera whispered fiercely. "Stay alive. They're coming for us." Above them, the sky rumbled. Not thunder. Engines. A helicopter. The thudding grew louder, chopping the storm-laden air. A helicopter. Real. Not a trick of the mind, not the cruel echo of thunder. Rivera's pulse surged as she raised her head above the ridge. Through the canopy, faint but undeniable, the blurred silhouette of a rescue chopper cut across the sky. "They heard us," Hall cried, her voice breaking through exhaustion. But Rivera knew better. Extraction was never simple. The storm still raged. The helicopter couldn't land on their ridge. The pilots would have to hover, rope them up one by one. It would take minutes. Minutes they didn't have. The enemy rush. Scar gave a sharp hand signal, his face twisted with fury. The smoke had robbed him of one man already. He wouldn't allow the rest of his prey to escape. The 3 surviving hunters surged upward, firing with disciplined precision, bullets snapping through the smoke. Contact left. Torres roared, returning fire, his weapon bucking in his hands. Rivera fired with him, her shots slicing brief windows into the stormy haze. Hall covered the right flank, her rifle barrel glowing faintly from the heat of so many rounds. The hunters moved like phantoms, each gunshot closer than the last. Rivera's stomach twisted. They weren't trying to kill quickly. They were trying to pin the squad until the helicopter left. Eliza's fading time. Eliza groaned, her voice barely a whisper. Her body was trembling, lips blue, pulse weak. "She's crashing," Hall muttered, ducking under incoming fire. "She won't make it 10 more minutes." Rivera pressed her forehead against the cold, rain-soaked rock. 10 minutes. That was all the hunters needed to win. Her radio crackled suddenly. "Squad, visual, on your position, deploying ropes. 60 seconds. Rivera's heart kicked. "Copy. We're pinned. Cover fire needed." The reply was curt. "Negative. Storm risk too high for guns hot. You've got to hold until we can hover steady. Hold. Again. Always hold." The helicopter appears. The chopper broke through the canopy above, blade screaming, wind whipping the jungle into a frenzy. A thick rope unfurled, slamming against the ridgestone. Torres' eyes lit up. "We've got it." But Rivera held out a hand. "Not yet. Cover first." She popped from cover, her rifle barking in tight bursts. Torres joined her, the 2 of them trading fire with the hunters pushing closer and closer. Hall scrambled to hook Eliza into the harness, clipped to the dangling rope. Rain slickened her fingers, the harness slipping, the rope swinging wildly in the storm's wind. Come on, come on," Hall hissed, tightening the straps around Eliza's frail frame. Eliza's eyes fluttered open, hazy, barely aware of what was happening. "Don't let them have me," she murmured. Hall swallowed hard. "Never. You're going home." Sacrifice in the storm. The first hunter broke through the smoke, his rifle snapping up. Torres spotted him first and tackled Rivera aside just as bullets stitched the ridge. Torres fired mid-fall, dropping the enemy in a spray of blood. "Down." Torres barked. 2 more. Rivera scrambled back up, adrenaline burning away fear. She sprayed the trees, keeping the other hunters pinned. Hall gave a final tug to Eliza's harness. "She's ready," she screamed. Rivera spun. "Lift her. Now." The helicopter's winch whined, pulling Eliza's limp form into the air. She dangled above the ridge, swaying wildly as the rope dragged her higher and higher into the storm. Rivera's chest loosened for the first time all night. Eliza was safe. But the fight wasn't over. Wolves to the end. Scar burst from the smoke with a roar, his scarred jaw clenched, eyes wild. His rifle was out of ammo. He came with a knife instead, sprinting up the ridge like a beast. Rivera and Torres opened fire together. Bullets punched into his chest, but momentum carried him forward. He slammed into Torres, knife slashing, both men tumbling to the mud. Torres grunted, locking Scar's wrist, the blade inches from his throat. Rivera rushed forward, jamming her rifle barrel against Scar's side. She fired point blank. The hunter convulsed, went still. Torres shoved him aside, his breath ragged, eyes wide. One left. They turned and saw the final hunter aiming from the trees, muzzle flashing. The bullet struck. Torres gasped and fell. Rivera dropped beside Torres instantly, hands pressed to his chest. Blood spilled hot and fast between her fingers. "No, no, no," she shouted. Torres coughed, blood staining his lips. His eyes were steady, even as his breath rattled. "Get out of here, Corporal." Rivera shook her head violently. "We're not leaving you. You hear me?" Hall's voice cracked behind her. "They're lowering the rope again. Rivera, we have to go." Another burst of gunfire tore overhead. The last hunter was still out there, reloading for the kill. Rivera looked into Torres' eyes. He squeezed her hand, weak but deliberate. "Protect them," he whispered. And then his grip loosened. Rivera froze. Just for a moment. Then rage consumed her. The last bullet. The final hunter emerged from the shadows, rifle raised. Rivera's vision tunneled. She snatched Torres' weapon from his lifeless hand, rolled into cover, and came up firing. The shots ripped through the storm. One struck the hunter square in the chest. He staggered back, eyes wide, and fell into the mud. Silence followed. Only rain. Only the helicopter blades above. Rivera's chest heaved. Hall was already screaming into the wind. "Rope's here. We've got to move. Extraction." Rivera shoved her grief into the deepest corner of her heart and hooked Hall into the harness first. "Go." Hall shook her head violently. "No, I'm not leaving you." Rivera's eyes burned. "That's an order, soldier." Hall hesitated, then nodded, tears streaming. The rope lifted her into the air, dragging her skyward. Rivera was last. She clipped the harness to her vest, grabbing Torres' dog tags with shaking fingers before stepping into the rope's grip. As the helicopter hauled her into the sky, she looked down one last time at the ridge. The bodies, the mud, the storm, and Torres lying still, his sacrifice sealing their survival. In the helicopter, Hall clutched Eliza's hand as medics worked frantically, shouting for fluids, for pressure on the wound. Eliza's pulse was faint, but there. Rivera collapsed against the wall, soaked, trembling. Her hands were still sticky with Torres' blood. The medic glanced up. "She's alive." "Barely." Rivera nodded numbly. Her eyes drifted to the tags in her palm. Torres' name engraved in cold steel. Hall met her gaze. "He saved us." Rivera's throat tightened. She closed her fist around the tags. "We'll make sure the world knows it." The helicopter tilted north, carrying them home through the storm. Epilogue. Weeks later, Eliza woke in a military hospital. Her first sight the faces of Rivera and Hall at her bedside. She tried to speak, but Rivera stopped her gently. "You don't owe us words, Sergeant," Rivera whispered. "You owe us life. And you've still got it." Eliza blinked tears. "Torres?" Rivera looked down, dog tags glinting in her hand. "He gave us this chance. We'll carry him with us forever." The three women sat in silence, bound tighter now than any oath could bind. For in the jungle, hunted and outnumbered, they had become something more than soldiers. They had become sisters.